Hey everyone, welcome back to Body Haven Soaps. My name is Darlene. I am the owner and creator of Body Haven Soaps, and on this channel I go over things that I've learned. I share recipes in hopes to help other creators create. So today's video is going to be all on rebatching. Now, as soap makers, if you are soap makers, we always have failed batches. And this is a really good way to use up a failed batch of soap, whether it be the color morphed or you had air bubbles all the way through it because your batter seized or what have you. Another reason that you rebatch is also to add more sensitive ingredients. So you may take a very basic soap bar recipe with all the oils and things you want in it. You're going to pour it into a mold, and then you're going to grate it all up, and now that's when we melt it down. We can add those more sensitive ingredients that can't handle the saponification process. So today's video we're going to do a rebatching on failed soaps. We're going to use a specific ingredients that I found work really well. I do have another video coming out where I will use beer in rebatching to make a beer soap, those types of things, but we're going to stick with the basics today. We're not going to get too complicated. You may rebatch also because of lye heavy soap, okay, and that's where you may be able to add in a little bit more oil. In a basic rebatch where I don't have lye heavy soap, I won't add any oils because then I get a greasy soap, okay. And if we have a really oily batch of soap, which I've never had happen to me yet, but it can happen, just a mistake in measurements or what have you, it turns out very greasy, well, we can rebatch that and actually add more lye to it. But that's a tricky one. You really have to watch your lye content, okay? So we're just going to go over the basics, and then throughout over time here, when I go and do some rebatching that I have, I will bring some other ideas forward for you. So today we're going to do the basics. So things that make a soap bar not so great. I have these ones here, okay, that I made a long time ago, and the color completely morphed. These are probably a year old, and you can see that the color has completely morphed, and they are horrible soaps, okay. They've just turned very ucky looking, okay. So we will rebatch these, okay. I do have the little embeds in here, you guys. I don't get too stressed about those. I just leave them in there. It seems to turn out fine. You can cut those embeds off. I also have a bag of soap here that I did of a watermelon soap, okay, and they have no fragrance to them. So they didn't turn out horrible, but there's no fragrance left on them, and I really... Okay, so different reasons why we may consider a batch a failed batch. So I have these watermelon soaps. I made these probably a year ago. This is actually watermelon lemonade. The scent did not stick whatsoever, so it just smells like a plain bar soap, and I actually don't like how they turned out. So I'm going to rebatch these because with no scent, it's not a very good bar soap. I have those. Then I have batches where I made really large batches, and I had so much extra left over, and I didn't make it into sample bars. So I have from soaps that I've made, I've just kept the extra pieces, and I can absolutely rebatch those, okay. I have ones that have botanicals on them, okay, and you can see the botanicals are all really old. This is just my naked soap bars. So there's nothing in here except for I used an infused oil with the herb, but the herbs have all got dried out and ugly, so I'm going to actually cut those herbs off and then grade this up and rebatch this, okay. I have other soaps that are just, you know, there's nothing really wrong with them, but they've just that I've pulled them off the shelf and not continue to have them on the shelf because of age of them. I'm going to rebatch those. I also have these soap bars here that I made that it is a hemp seed oil soap, but the fragrance that I used, it was the first time ever using that fragrance. It is so strong. So I can rebatch these with maybe something like this that has no fragrance in it and mellow out that scent some to reuse those so it's not wasted. I also have very dark soaps that that morph that I don't really care for, that I can use up. I have these black bars with the soap, salt on top of them. These didn't go over well. People weren't really interested in it, and that's fine. It's part of the learning and going through the products and, you know, finding out what your customers want. So I can use these and rebatch them into another type of soap. The only thing that I would pay attention to, you guys, for you guys, is I would make sure that when I'm rebatching, and as you can see, I have a lot of failed recipes or recipes I wasn't 100% satisfied. That is going to happen. There's nothing wrong with the actual soap, but the product itself either smelled too strong, didn't hold its scent, morphed the color, those types of things, okay? But you're gonna have to watch what you mix with what. If I was to grade these up and mix them with any of these other ones, I'm gonna end up with another black soap. That I know, because these are activated charcoal and Himalayan salt bars. Okay, so I'm going to have to change and make sure I mix dark with dark. Okay, now an easy way, if you're doing a plain white bar like this, guys, this is one that you could absolutely cut the tops off, grade it down, and this is one that you could absolutely add your sensitive products to and make it what you want, because it is very plain Jane. But my favorite thing for coloring soaps for rebatching is using a clay. Clays really hold the dominant color. So today we are going to do some rebatching, and it really is long. I'm not going to go with black because my clays won't show up. These dark brown ones will probably go with those blacks because they're a little bit too dark of a color. Other than that, I'm kind of an open slate. For today's, I'm going to use all my morphed colors, and I am going to use the red clay, and I'm going to make this a red soap. So we'll go through the steps. So first thing, you guys, grading it is a lot of work. Okay, now I've thought about getting a grater for attachment for my mixer, my KitchenAid, and doing that, which would make this a lot faster. However, they are expensive, and for how much rebatching I don't do enough to justify the expense of buying that. So I just grade it by hand for the amount I have to do. Now, I haven't done a rebatch in probably a year, so this is my year's worth of failed soaps, and I will do my rebatching before the end of the year. I kind of try and set it up that way, so if I have a failed batch, I will throw them into bags or soaps that I have pulled off, and I've only got a couple left. I'll throw them into my rebatching boxes because I've come out with a new one, or I've changed the style of it. Okay, so I have a few of those, but in regards to it, this is about a year of my failed or pulled soaps. And this, I try and get my rebatching done by the end of the year. So going into the new year, I've got everything used up. All right, so grading, I'm going to do it by hand. It takes a little while, and then we'll go through the steps of how we do rebatching. Okay, so as you can see, I got quite a bit graded. I used not even I don't even know how many bars I graded, but I have enough to do probably another 4 batches of rebatch, and I might not need all this soap, but this took me about 20 minutes to grade in total, so it's not horrible, you guys. And some of this was pretty old soap from the beginning of last year. As I said, I do this every year, but I fill this crock pot up because I do it in a crock pot. This is the safest. If you scorch it, you will ruin it, so I use a crock pot. This is just an old crock pot that I got at a secondhand place. But we want this full, and then I have my excess to the side that I can continue to add, because this is the mold that I want to fill with this rebatch. So I want to make sure that I have enough, and I know what I fit in here is not going to be enough to fill this mold, so I will add to it as this melts down. Okay, so that's kind of the goal there. So now that I have this all graded down, we're going to turn on this crock pot. Now I turn it on to high for the first 15-20 minutes to get everything to start getting to that hot temperature that we need to melt this down, and then I will turn it down to low so it does not scorch. Okay, so we have our, and there's many different kinds that I've put in here. Okay, and that's just our soap. Now to get this to melt down to a point where it's going to be fluid, there's a few techniques that I have learned. Okay, and I'm going to make a few different rebatches that you guys will see where I'll do different methods. But for this method today, I'm going to use goat's milk that I have diluted in, or dissolved in, distilled water. Okay, now the amount of fluid that you add is really dependent on how old your soap is, how dry is your soap. If this was a batch of soap that I just did and it was didn't turn out the way I wanted to, or the color morphed and I graded it right away while it was still soft, this wouldn't need as much fluid, right, to get to that fluid stage. But because this is all old soap that has dried and I've had it around for months and months, I'm going to need more fluid. So there is no specific amount of fluid. I found it really just depends. Some of these bars were drier than other bars, so it's really hard to estimate. So I add 2 to 3 ounces to start off with, and then I just add it to it as it needs it. So you'll see that throughout this process. Okay, so we have this on, and you guys, I don't measure out my fluids, but I'm going to put in about 2 to 3 ounces of the goat's milk. Okay, so we'll start with that. That may have been 4 ounces, but that's what I'm going to start with. Okay, and that's just goat's milk powder that I have dissolved into distilled water. All right, another thing that I add to this is going to be lactic acid. Now, I've read lots on rebatching soap and the sodium lactate. There's sites that say, you know, add an ounce to every pound. There's all different stipulations out there. I have tried it many different ways, and I learned the hard way. An ounce to every pound, your soap is going to turn out brittle, and it's going to be crumbly, and it is going to be horrible. I've never had a good experience with adding that much. So in fact, to this whole batch, all I'm going to add in is 1 ounce. So when I make a batch that I'm looking to fill this mold with, okay, I use 1 ounce. All right, and that's all I use. It does help to liquefy this somewhat, kind of, and it does produce a nice hard bar afterwards. You get too much in there, I find it creates a problem. Maybe it's the way I'm doing it, but I don't add that much lactic acid. I find it makes my soap dry and brittle. So because I know this is the size I'm doing, which is the size I always do, I'm going to add 1 ounce of lactic acid to help solidify this and to help harden it when it is curing. And for right now, that is all we are going to add to this. Okay, and I am going to leave this with a lid on it for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and stir. So I'll bring you back in 20 minutes and we'll see where we are. I will stir it, and talk about the steps that we go through. All right, guys, so about 25 minutes have gone by, and you can see how it has melted down and shrunk. We'll give this a stir, and you'll see it's starting to get all goopy on the bottom. I can tell already that I'm going to need more liquid in here. You can see how this is all melting down nice. So I'm actually going to add in the rest of this milk I already have dissolved, because I'm going to add in more of my soap. Just going to mix this moisture in. And you can see that gets it a lot more liquidy. I'm actually going to make up more milk because I feel like I'm going to need some, and if I don't, I can use it in another recipe. But I'm going to put in more grated soap. Now that I've got this melted down quite a bit, you can see how much that deflates because it's all grated. So we want to make sure that we have enough in here to fill my mold. So I'm going to fill this pot up one more time. And I find if I fill it for the second time like this, I have enough for my mold. So that is what we're going to do. We're just going to give this a little bit of a stir in so that I don't just have that moisture on the bottom. Because I don't want that already melted stuff just sitting on the bottom scorching. And because I have this other soap already in there, partially melted down, I'm going to leave this for about 10 minutes, come back, I will check the moisture level and turn it down to low. So I'm going to leave it on high for another 10 minutes and then come back. All right, so another 10 minutes has gone by. We're going to give this a stir, mix it around. You can see how it's getting a lot more liquidy. All right, guys, so this is about 20 minutes longer. The battery died on my camera while I was explaining what I was doing before, so I'm just going to catch you up from the point we left off. I did end up putting the rest of this bucket of soap into the pot because I decided that I have to do 3 batches and I want to do 3 different clay soaps, so I'm just going to use my sample mold when it comes to any excess that's left over, and we can use those ourselves or what have you. So I have added that in. I also added another 2 ounces of fluid in here, and I turned it to low. Okay, and I left it sit on low for 20 minutes. Now when you look at this, you can see how nice and fluidy this is, and it's really starting to break down, becoming nice and liquidy. And I like to add a little extra liquid to mine, guys. The curing time, yes, is longer, but I don't want to, I want to sell these, so I don't want to put a bunch of air bubbles in the middle of my soap bar. So I want it a little bit more fluidy, and I will deal with the extra cure time for a nicer bar of soap. Okay, so now that I've got it at this point, and I've got, you can see I've got quite a bit in this crock pot, so it is a pretty big batch, but you can make this as much space as you have. I'm going to now take my beater and I'm going to whip this to try and help break up all the parts and get it well incorporated together. So as simple as that, I will just set this off to the side. I am going to let this sit for another 20 minutes, and you guys, normally you wouldn't have to leave it sit this long. It's because I keep adding shredded soap to this. You can see there's still whole chunks of shredded soap in there, and I'm not trying to make a confetti soap, so I need those to break down. And the only reason that I'm having to cook this again for another 20 minutes is because I did add in the rest of those, so they haven't been in here long enough to break down. But you can see this is turning into a really nice fluid. Okay, and with whipping it, we get some air in it. These soap will actually probably float. We'll check it out after we get it done. I have not tested that aspect of it, but feeling how light this is, it feels like a whipped soap. So I will leave this sit for another 20 minutes on low because I don't want to scorch it at this point. And we will come back. Alright guys, so it's been another 20 minutes. As you can see, it starts to puff up when it heats. Like you can see how it came up from the last time. And it hardens really quick. Like it's hard on this spatula already. So we want to pull it away from the edges. And you can see this is nice and melted. I'm going to give it a stir with my blender. There's still a few chunks of soap in there. That seems to be the red from the... Alright, so now that we have that done, you guys, I'm actually going to take a little bit of distilled water. Not a large amount because I don't want to add a whole bunch more to this, but I'm going to take maybe an ounce, ounce and a half. I don't get too worried about water amounts in this. I don't want a large amount, but I just pay attention to the consistency of it. And we are going to put in this Australian red Reef Clay so that we get rid of this green color that you guys are seeing take place. Now you could mix this with your fragrance oil, but I like to mix my fragrance oil in very last so it's not cooking off. So we will take this clay, and I mean, once again, you guys, no exact measurements when I'm doing this. I will mix it, and when I feel like I've got the right color, because clays, I mean, I guess you could get really large amounts where it would be too much. We want to make this look like a nice clean bar soap without having... So we're going to go with the red Reef Clay. So this will be and I like using the distilled water because it really does blend this through here a lot better. Okay, and we will blend this. So I'm liking this. I have this on low still. We're going to move some of this stuff out of my way here. All right, guys, so what we're going to do is get our fragrance oil in here and then mold this fairly quickly. I leave the heat on because I want this to stay nice and fluid and airy like it is. So the fragrance oil I'm going to use, it is Tramp Dupe by Lush. So it's Tramp by Lush dupe that they do. Okay, it has got a very light scent to it, so I've never tried it in my cold process soap because I don't think that it would withstand it once I purchased it. So this would be a great option for using up your fragrance oils or sensitive essential oils that can't take the saponification. This is a great opportunity to use that up. Now, I don't need as much because this doesn't go through the saponification process, and I don't want this to be a very strong smelling soap. This is a very mild fragrance, okay? But I have a full pot here, so I would have at least probably 5 pounds of soap. Okay, so checking out my fragrance ratio from Fizz Fairy, what they document on this, and I would only go with probably 2%, guys, but the option's yours as long as you're not going over your percentages for allowed use. So you guys, I'm only putting 1 ounce of fragrance oil in here. So that is about 2% for this batch. And we'll see where that gets us, okay? So fragrance oil goes in. I am going to use my spatula to get everything away from the sides to make sure that I have this all mixed in here nicely. You don't want pockets of fragrance oil, so you need to make sure that you mix it well. And this also makes sure that you don't have any of that green color left in there. And you guys, just smelling this, that is plenty of fragrance in this soap. Okay, so when we're doing this, you guys, I leave the heat on so that this stays warm because we have to move fairly quickly, okay, because this does set up really fast. And I just have it on low so it doesn't cook my fragrance oil off, but we're just going to take and start putting our batter in, shaking it down, making sure we get it into all of the spaces. And I do, whoops, and here I am throwing it around. Okay, and then once I get to that point, okay, where I have, and you can see this is setting up on here already. Let's get the damp cloth. Okay, I'm going to tap this. I will mute this so you guys don't hear me banging this. Okay guys, so now that I got things cleaned up, as you see, I did not make samples. I added enough in here that I made 2 full tall loaf molds. Okay, so that is what I've done. Just a few quick tips when you're doing this, you guys. I love using clays because it colors things really nice and makes a nice clean bar. Second of all, use your fragrance oils with the percentages that you would use in a lotion. This isn't going through the saponification process, and I find if I use the same percentages recommended for a lotion, I get a really nice smell that's not overpowering and it's not going to irritate people's skin. Okay, so that is how I do, one way I do, I have multiple ways that I do this, that I do my rebatching to use up old soaps. We will be back tomorrow and I will cut these for you and show you what they look like. Okay guys, it is the next day, so we are going to pull these out of the mold and we are going to cut them to see what we got. Okay guys, so here is the soap bars. They are very lightweight bars. Like I said, there's a few pieces where my soap didn't melt completely and get colored, but it's very minute. The soap being whipped obviously didn't have enough weight to it to push the sides out on the lining. So this is something that I would probably, if I'm going to whip it this much, do in a silicone mold instead of a lined mold because the batter's not heavy enough. I'm not 100% happy with how it turned out, but we're going to dry this and see how it works out. It's better than what the soap bars were. It does smell good, and there definitely is a lot of skin loving properties to this. So we will see where we go from there, but overall, not too bad. Maybe you just need to start piping the top. All right, so if you guys give this a try, maybe just make a comment below and see if anybody else comes up with any more tips or tricks. I have a couple other different ways that I make rebatching, so we'll have videos on that later. I have some new ideas I want to try as well. Okay, all right, so thanks for watching. Have a great day.